Okay, in this next video we're going to have a look at the tool palette. So the tool palette is where you're going to find all the different tools to process your image. Okay, so the tool palette, just over here you have a whole list of tools down here. Now if you hover over these tools, it tells you what the tool is. So that's the move tool. It also gives you a letter beside the tool, so that letter is a shortcut. So if I was to click, if I was say on the Marquee Tool and I just clicked on V, well then it will move straight to the move tool. Okay, so everything has a shortcut. If I click or if I press down, it shows me options, so I can move from the move tool to the artboard tool. The artboard tool is not a tool that I use, so we can have a look at that another time. But primarily I'm using the move tool in that selection. So the move tool is exactly what it sounds like. So when we have multiple layers, which we'll go through later on, we can pick a layer up and move it around. The simple fact is we have only a background layer, so there's nothing to move. So that's your background. It's like how, if you had a board and you had maybe objects on the board, well you can't move the board around. Essentially you can only move the objects around, so we have no objects on the board yet, so it's not going to allow us to move. The Marquee tool is a selection tool, and if we hold down on the Marquee tool you have a rectangular, elliptical, single row, single column. So they're your options in the Marquee tool. The Marquee tool, which is used to make selections. Okay, so we can draw a rectangle, and that's a selection made. What we use that selection for we'll go through later on, but I just want at this point for you to see what these tools are. Okay, so what we can do is, once we have something selected, we can go up into the selection menu and select and deselect, or we can use our shortcut, which I will go through the shortcuts as I'm going through, but it's something you learn over time. But if I hit Command or Control D, it's deselect. And how you learn these shortcuts is, if you have a look through here, deselect is Command D. So where you see all these symbols beside different commands, those symbols are the shortcuts. So if we go through, say, to image size is Shift Command I, and so on. So there is a lot of shortcuts, and we will go through them. I don't use everything. I usually use the really quick ones. On to the next tool. So the next tool again is another selection tool. This one here is the Lasso tool. You also have the Polygonal Lasso tool and the Magnetic Lasso tool. Again, these are selection tools, and we will go through when we're covering selection a little bit later on, but again I just want you to see what these tools are for. So if we were just to grab the Lasso tool, basically you're just drawing like a pencil, and before, when you let it go, like the Marquee tool, we're creating this selection. So this gives you, it's basically a free-form selection tool. With the if we just move over to the Polygonal tool, basically you pick a point, next point, next point, next point. So you creating, you know, you have a bit more control, but again it's more angular. Okay, and the last one is your Magnetic Lasso tool. So basically it kind of hugs along a line, so you can see there's a definite line between the headland and the sky, so it's doing as best it can, it's hugging that line. Okay, so that's your three different I suppose quick selection tools or easy selection tools. The next one again is another way of selecting. This one is a quick selection, and we also have the magic one, sorry. So quick selection basically is we're selecting again an area. The more I move, it selects an area and it's picking that harsh line again. These are, I think, at best rough and ready. It's not how I would do a general basic selection this way, and then I would refine my selection in a more detailed way. So that's how you make a selection tool with the quick selection. It's very quick. If you're trying to make a quick selection, it's a great tool. But if you want to be a little bit more detailed, we can adjust the fine detail, we can refine the edge and so on, but I just don't find it to be the most accurate way to make a selection. Okay, Command D or Control D again. And if we go into the magic wand is, I find again, it's a great quick selection tool. So what it's doing, it has a tolerance. So if I'm going to make a selection of the water, so what it's doing, it's got a tolerance of 30. Basically, it's like a tonal range. So if we go in, there's not just white here. There's whites and greys and warmer whites and cooler whites. It's got a tolerance of 30, so it's basically ranging between 30 different tones. So if I just want to select something very specific, I'm going to bring my tolerance down. Okay, so if we were to deselect and bring that tolerance down to say 5, okay, that's going to make a much smaller selection. It's going to be a bit more specific. So if you had a color that a very specific area, it might be an all white or pure black area, it would select it very well when you take the tolerance down. So just some selection tools there. The next one is your crop tool. So we can very simply just crop the image down, hit enter, and we have a new photo. We've got another one up there. I'm just going to close this one down. So obviously we don't want to crop that. I'm just going to use my shortcut and go back one step. So we can crop this many different ways. So we can choose a ratio to crop. So we can go in here and just width, height, resolution ratio, or we can pick specific preset ratios in there. So there's all different sizes. Or you can go with the original ratio. So whether that's a 3:2, which comes out of your camera by default, or you may have changed it in Camera Raw. You may have cropped and changed the ratio, so you can keep the ratio that you cropped out of. Or you can go into width, height, and resolution, and you might go in and pick 5 inches by 4 inches by 6 inches, and you might do a PPI, which is your pixels per inch, and you might make that 300. So basically when we hit crop, it's going to be, we just hit yes, it's going to crop that. If we go into our image and check image size, you should see over here now, if we change this 2 inches, that's a 6 by 4 inch photo with at 300 ppi. So this is a great way to a great place to crop for printing and getting everything ready. This is how I prepare my files for printing. I crop and resize and so on within Photoshop. But again, we're going to go back to our original. Now over here is the eyedropper. Okay, you've got the eyedropper, 3D material eyedropper. It's not something I use. Color sample tool, again, not something I use. I occasionally might use the ruler, but it's not really with processing images. It's more if I'm creating some sort of graphic design where I'm measuring things. Mainly the eyedropper if I wanted to pick a color in here, so I can pick any color within the image. I may be using it to create a text to match the color. I may be using it to maybe create a brush stroke that I can blend something in. I may be missing some pixels that I want to swap and I don't have something to clone from, so I may use a color of the sand to paint over an area that, I don't know. It can be for anything really. Sometimes you might be doing, it's not something I do, but some people, if they're creating a canvas, a stretched canvas, they might want a border around the edge, and they may use an I suppose a color from the image to match the border with the photo. So there's lots of different uses for it. but that's your eyedropper tool. In here you have the spot healing brush, which I'm not going to go into the details of what these tools are. Spot healing brush, and patch tool. Content aware move tool. It's a great tool, a little bit more advanced. Might do it in a later video. Red eye tool, something I never use. I honestly don't remember the last time I got a red eye in a photograph. So we'll go through these in more detail a little bit later when we're talking about cloning and so on. Also cleaning a file, great tools, just so you know where they are. Okay, the brush is probably the most used tool you have. Okay, you have the pencil, color replacement tool, mix brush. I don't really use these three. The brush tool you use every single time you use Photoshop, without a doubt. It's probably the most used tool in the palette. Clone stamp is your main one, and the pattern stamp tool. Again, I don't use the pattern stamp. I do use the clone stamp. Simply if we want a nice clean beach and we want to remove this seaweed, well, you're going to use a mixture of clone stamp, healing brush, or spot healing. So a mixture of those will give you a really perfect clean result. History brush tool, art history brush. Again, I've used them in the past. I was shown how to use them. I don't find a need for them very much, and it's not something I use. Probably not something I'll cover in this workshop. Eraser tool, background eraser. Again, magic eraser. I use the first one. I don't use the second two. Again, I use this sparingly. I don't use it a lot within processing landscape images. It's more graphic stuff. If I'm creating, signage, or if I'm creating, say, brochures, things like that. It's something, or for web stuff where I need transparency and so on, when I'm putting ads or promos on the website. So again, I'll show you how to use it, but it's not something I use often. Gradient tool, we'll go through it, but again, also paint bucket. It's just a really quick way of filling in a space. Like the brush, it's as simple as it seems. If you want to paint something really quickly, throw a bucket of paint on the floor. If you want to paint it slowly, use a small paintbrush. That's exactly what it is. That's the difference between the paintbrush and the paint bucket tool. Don't use the 3D material dropper. Again, I don't do 3D stuff on here. Blur, sharpen, smudge. Again, I don't use any of these. I don't find a need for them. Down here you have also the dodge and burn. Again, it's quite an old way of doing things. I prefer to do things with adjustment layers, and I can get the same result, but it's less destructive, which I'll explain a little bit more later on. So these are not really any tools here that I use very often. The pen tool is a very good tool. It's a great selection tool, but it's an advanced selection tool. Okay, so it's not probably something we'll be doing in this series. It's something I'll do later on. It is a very good tool, probably the best selection tool you use. It's very accurate, but it does take a little bit of skill and a bit of practice to get used to it. But it is excellent. Text. So if you want to write on your image, again, I don't write on my photos. If I'm putting a logo, it's generally an image logo, a transparent with a transparent background, which I just drop and drag. Text is more reserved if I'm doing, again, any sort of advertisement banners, website stuff, making business cards, pamphlets, booklets, anything to that effect. I'll use the text tool. It is very useful. Most people that are designing those kind of things will use probably InDesign. I'm not an InDesign expert, so I use Photoshop, and the results I get are fine for what I use it for. So the text tool is a very good tool, but it has its place. Part selection index, something I don't use again, and rectangle tool round. So again, none of these tools are things I use processing my photos. They're things, again, I use more in creating some sort of graphic media. The hand tool, yes, I do grab the hand tool on a regular basis. If I want to resize things, so I want to make the image 100%, I want to fit the screen and fill the screen and so on. So it's just a really quick thing, quick tool to just resize your image. You can again just press H and it will bring you straight to the hand tool. That's generally what I do, just quickly hit H to bring an image to fit the screen and so on. And down here there's really nothing else. Edit toolbar, don't really edit the toolbar, I leave it as it is. This one here is just for switching. See here, we're switching between foreground and background. Your foreground color, obviously your background color. This is just to switch back to original black and white. So you always use, for the majority of the time, you're using a black brush and a white brush. The reason for that will be explained much later in more videos when we're talking about masks and layers and so on. But this one just brings it back to your original. This one switches between the two. Basically, it brings your white to the foreground, puts it back, black back to the background, and so on, vice versa. This is again a quick mask tool. We'll go into this a little bit later on. And down at the bottom here, standard screen. It's just toggling your screen. I already use a shortcut for toggling my screen. So there you go. So change it to full screen. Removes if you have multiple files open, it'll just show the one you're working on and so on. It makes it for a cleaner interface if you're doing it that way. My screens are quite large, so when I do that, it uses the full screen. We're actually only working with, say, 2/3 of the screen at the moment for 1080, just because it works better on video, so you don't really get the full effect on the video. Okay, so that's a very, very quick explanation of our tool palette and what the tools are. It's very quick. We will go into each tool that we're using in more detail, and it will make more sense when you see the tools being used on the image that we're working on. Okay.